Hello, commenters and or non-commenters vlog every day in April number 7. So, it has come to my attention that this little itchy spot on my neck is suspicious. It is not a hickey. It kind of looks like one, but no, my neck is just itchy, and so I've been itching there. Put some hydrocortisone in there, so it would stop itching. So far that has been slightly unsuccessful. It's been slightly successful though, so glass half full. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about when to give up. So the thing about giving up is there are very few times when people feel like their giving up is justified. And the thing about giving up is it's a choice that you make, because dependent of how strongly of a promise that you made, or how strongly of a dedication, how strongly dedicated you were to carrying out that task, or carrying out that goal that you had for yourself, and depending on what it be, it all really depends. And giving up is seen as a negative thing a lot of times, and a lot of the times this is because it affects other people, but other times giving up affects almost solely yourself. And this is rare, but it's possible, and it's an occurrence. And so the times that it is appropriate to give up is basically the way that you need to decide whether or not you're going to give up is first of all, to decide whether or not you even think about and even decide, first to choose whether or not even to decide on it, whether or not to give up, is how much time would deciding and weighing those options, and how much would it affect the outcome of what you are giving up on, or of what you would be potentially giving up on, or what you would actually give up on. It's interesting because we make these decisions and we think about things where we are taking up time thinking about something that's taking up our time, and so we're thinking about it because it's taking up our time, and so then we end up wasting more time not focusing on the actual task, but instead focusing on the time that it's taking up, therefore taking up more time. I'm sorry that that sounded weird, but it's very interesting that we do this, and I do this, and I know that other people do this, because I'm not just a crazy human being, because I know I'm human, and so is everyone else around me. And so one of the things that, when you're very first deciding whether or not to give up on something, is it worth it? So is it worth it to keep going, or is it worth it to give up? Now the thing with that is it going to cause you physiological or emotional pain? Is it going to cause you, and will the pain, rather not the pain, but will the things that make your life worse, will the things that make your life worse outweigh the things that make your life better? And then, with that, if you've answered with that, you need to say, will the things that make my life worse or better, will those make other people's lives, will that make more of other people's lives worse or better? And thinking about this, it takes a lot of time, and it doesn't just take a lot of time because you're thinking about one thing. It's because you have to think about lots and lots of things when you're doing this. And the problem is, when people give up on something, they think very short term about it, and they try to justify something long term, and often it's not very well thought out. So if I were to say, I am going to quit school because I don't like it right now. That is a very, very, very just rash, short-term sort of thing, and it it is absolutely ridiculous because, well, at my age, maybe for someone who's maybe a graduate student, and it's not so ridiculous, but for someone who's my age to say, I'm going to quit school right now because I don't like it at the present moment, that's a very rash, very short-term, it's a very short-term decision, but it affects you long-term, and the thing is, you're basing that on absolutely nothing in the long term. Oh, almost absolutely nothing in the long term. Because what you're doing is, instead of saying, okay, so the unemployment rate for people who haven't earned a high school education is like, it's about, I'm pretty sure it's 18%, because 7.8% is about the unemployment across the board as an average, and then it goes up as you get a higher degree and higher degree. And it may not look like this. Originally, when my dad came upstairs and he said, "Hey, Keenan, what do you think this and this and this and this is?" And so I made my predictions, and then it was absolutely shattered because I expected him to just because he had come up and said this, I expected him to say something instead unexpected, and so it's kind of amazing because when there's that baseline level, because not only does it not only does it increase sort of an educational sort of thing, it's also a social environment, and it helps you deal with other human beings, and I feel like that's something that people don't really grasp, and they think oh, I have these friends. But maintaining connections in places outside of a work and school sort of setting is difficult. And I've heard a lot of adults complain about like it's difficult making friends as an adult because you don't really have those opportunities, and people are more closed off than they are when they're adolescent, and when they're children, and when they're young in college, from just infantileness to college age, and so it's all very interesting. But so just deciding whether or not you're going to give up, there are only really three main things that you have to consider. Is so how does it affect my life? So does it affect my life positively or negatively? And how much of each, because of course there's going to be things that are positive and negative about there are going to be things that are positive and negative about every single decision that you make, and then does it affect the people around me positively or negatively, or potentially the future people around me positively or negatively? And three, why am I thinking about this? And so, why are you thinking about this is very interesting, because it sort of makes you take a step back, and it makes you sort of look out. It sort of makes you be an outsider looking in instead, because you have to say, what prompted this? What prompted my thought about this? And if it's a culmination of things, then it's probably better then it's probably a little bit more likely, and I'm not saying that giving up in the situation, if there's a culmination of things, is better, but it's better than if it's prompted by one single thing. Because if it's prompted by one single thing, and I don't mean one thing that sort of like was the straw that broke the camel's back, I mean one thing. And like maybe a few things, but a full, just sort of accumulative experience that you've had of something being negative, and something that you found has caused something that has been more detrimental to your existence and other people's existence around you, and to the relationships with the people that you have around you, and I'm not saying that you should hold the relationships above, and I'm not saying that like you should hold the relationships that you have above what you need to do, but it's more important. Like if someone was in a 1 week relationship with someone who they had like a one night stand that just awkwardly turned into that, and then they sort of started developing feelings for each other. That is not a relationship worth crap, and that is not something worth giving up on. And making decisions while intoxicated are not the things that people should be doing when making decisions that while they're intoxicated is not something that people should be doing just as a whole in general, because they have the functioning capacity of, I don't know, I think a 3-year-old, or actually no, of I think it was, and this was from something, I don't know why it was stated this way, but of a 7-year-old with Down syndrome. I don't know why it was phrased that way, but it was interesting, and sort of deciding to give up on something when there isn't a lot of time available to decide, hey, I'm going to give this up. If it is something in the very fundamental stage of saying, if it's your first week of college and you're saying, wow, this really sucks, I'm not going to do it. Likely in your first week of college, it sucks for, reasons that aren't long-term things that, are just going to be crap, but they're just sort of kind of superficial kind of things. And they don't have to be superficial things, but they can be things that aren't really related. And so when you are making a decision and you signed up for a class, if you were rushed into you were rushed into making the decision, like signed up and being signed up for classes for the next fall term, and then you made the decision after you've submitted all your forms and paid money to people, or not paid money to people, or taken out a loan or something, and you've made the decision and you've put a lot of forethought into it, saying, hey, I really don't want to do this, but then it's too late to do that. What you need to do is you need to keep going until the end of the term, because I've seen people who've just stopped, and then it's sort of a snowball effect, because it's not that it's like, oh, you no longer have this college education, but it's saying, oh crap, now there's a bunch of creditors like coming and sort of doing these things, and it's really interesting the things that I've seen with people, and how that's affected how it's affected their life as a whole, and it's has absolutely nothing to do with the educational side of it, but almost all having to do with the monetary side of it. And these sort of things are really just these sort of things are they sort of bring a perspective to you, as well as they sort of make you regret things. But once you've sort of figured things out, they give you, they show the people around you what not to do. And something that I really like is, when I was younger, learning from other people's mistakes and just trying to absorb as many of the mistakes that other people have made, so I don't have to make those mistakes for myself. And there are some things that I've observed of people that the same mistakes that I've made of people who I've observed making those mistakes, and they're very common mistakes, and it's just sort of a thing where you've observed and then you're justifying it with saying, I'm only human. Um, so yeah, that has been my video for today. It's been very long, but I've enjoyed this. So yeah, have a wonderful day or evening. I'm sorry for posting the video so darn late.